thank you, David Simone, and the team at Techonomy for inviting me. This is the second time I've been invited to speak, and it's an honor to be here. And welcome to, for those of you who are not from New York, welcome to New York. It is the most diverse and the most empathetic tech community in the world. And if you look at the schedule, it says I'll talk a little bit about Trump. I have to tell you that I finished this talk about 30 minutes ago, which is why David didn't get my notes. And the reason I didn't get my notes is because I was checking my Washington Post and New York Times feed to find out the latest crazy thing that just happened so I could include it. So if I didn't catch it, it's because I'm 30 minutes behind what's going on at the White House. But for those of you who have missed it this morning and paying attention to the panels and not to your feed from the New York Times, the Russians are now corroborating our president's story about what classified information he didn't share at the meeting with them in the Oval Office. So if you want to know that our democracy has gone off the rails, we're now using Russians to corroborate the president's statements. And I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about Trump, but I do want to use him as a starting point. And we've all talked about, you've all heard the arguments, the attempts to try to solve the issues associated with the term fake news. But I would argue that we have a much bigger problem. We actually have a fake democracy. So, we once had a democracy that matched our times. It was invented in the agricultural age, and it was at a time when people were working 16 hours a day and actually didn't have the time to delve into the company's issues and problems, and it made sense. Pick some rich farmers, they'll figure it out. And they did it reasonably, if any of you have seen Hamilton, they did a pretty reasonable job trying to lay some framework for a country that, by the way, is an experiment that doesn't exist anywhere else. Take people from around the world, bring them to another place, and start a new country from scratch. That doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. Okay, I stand corrected. But not in the length of time that we've been doing it. But my larger point is that it may have worked in the agricultural age. It's been subverted and manipulated and corrupted in the industrial age. And I'll give you a couple quick examples. Gerrymandering, voter ID laws, voting on Tuesdays. Do you know why we vote on Tuesdays, by the way? Because it was market day, and that's when farmers came to town and they could get the most people to show up. And it's been staying that way because changing it would change the power structures in Washington. Money in politics, super PACs, and let me not even begin, let's not even start talking about the Electoral College. But here's a test to prove to you what I mean. So 4 years ago, Congress voted, not unanimously, but decisively, to force the NSA to stop collecting information, metadata and other information they were collecting on Americans in their system. How many of you believe that the NSA actually stopped doing that when Congress ruled that as being illegal? I'd like you to notice that not a single one of you has raised your hand. Now think about that. Our Congress voted to stop the NSA from doing mass surveillance, and you don't believe that they actually stopped? What more proof do you have that we have a fake democracy? We got to do something about this, and it's not going to get solved because of technology. Just back to Trump for a second. I'm going to read this quickly, this alternative universe that was published by my partner, Mika Sifry from Civic Hall, where President Hillary Clinton is president. Let me read this to you. President Clinton quietly sent her son-in-law, investment banker Mark Mavesky, to Iraq Monday, adding winning the war against ISIS to his growing list of responsibilities, which also include solving Middle East peace, heading the new White House Office of American Innovation, managing the U.S.-China summit, and ending the opioid crisis. The Chinese government, convinced of Mazursky's importance to the Clinton White House, not only has established a back channel to him through its ambassador in Washington, it has also quietly encouraged Chinese State Bank to invest in his troubled hedge fund. His family is also peddling visas to investors for his real estate project in New Jersey. Meanwhile, Clinton's husband has largely stayed out of the White House and has remained home in New York. Her daughter Chelsea has also taken an unpaid role in the administration while continuing to run the Family Foundation and earning 5 to 6 figure fees, giving speeches to corporations with interests in Washington. Meanwhile, most top cabinet level positions still remain unfilled. Although one piece of unexpected news, Clinton's longtime confidant and political advisor, Sidney Blumenthal, has been removed from his brief stint as a member of the National Security Council. Can you imagine if all these things were happening in Hillary Clinton's presidency, where we'd be? We have to be careful of the new normal because it has huge implications. Our infrastructure is crumbling. Our schools are failing still. Our universal health care system, although not perfect, is being targeted and manipulated to create a huge tax break for the rich. Our environment is eroding beyond repair, and the regulations protecting our privacy and security and our net neutrality are being dismantled. At the same time, technology continues to advance and evolve at an ever-increasing speed. And as much as we love some of the benefits of technology and the promises that it will improve our lives, there's more and more evidence that it actually may damage the human experience. And of those of you who don't know his work, you should look at the work of Tristan Harris, who's spoken at Techonomy before, who has a theory that these technologies are actually designed to take our time away and that we're not actually building empathy into the technology itself. But there's also more evidence that the digital divide is growing, not just because 20% of the US population is not able to afford broadband, and a third of the world is still not online, but because the skills needed to navigate the 21st century economy are changing, and people are not able to protect their data and their security. And I'm sorry, when we have autonomous vehicles, we are not going to teach all those Uber drivers to code. We are not going to turn them all into entrepreneurs. And that's not that far away. And we don't have the policy institutions or the thinking in order to be able to address these problems on a systemic scale. So you've probably heard of civic tech, gov tech, urban tech, smart city tech. I was happy to hear this morning's panel about the New York ecosystem, but I would argue that the most successful tech company in New York is actually Crisis TextLine, if you haven't heard of it. Raised $25 million, and within 3 years has become the de facto crisis response platform for every area code in the country, started by Nancy Lublin. It is replacing 800 numbers city by city and saving people's lives by the thousands now. Born in New York, distributed from New York. We should have hundreds of companies like that, not just one. But if a company creates a technology that allows the police department to check the social media profiles of African Americans that they pull over at the side of the road and check to see if they tweeted about Black Lives Matter, should we call that civic tech? Should we call that gov tech? Should we allow that to happen? And how many would you agree with me right now that Palantir is working behind the scenes building a database, probably using AI, to identify where 11 million undocumented people are hiding in the United States and who's supporting them and protecting them? And I'm sorry, I know that we run these conferences based on sponsorship, but I would ask you all to double check next time you're talking to Palantir, who sometimes does great work. Ask them to be more transparent about the work that they actually are doing for our federal government. We are transforming our economy to the 21st century, but we're not transforming our democracy. We need to develop new forms of governance. And they're not going to be based on whether we have people voting like thumbs up or thumbs down on a huge international platform like a giant coliseum. We have to come up with entirely new ways of thinking about how an interconnected society of people, where nation states are obsolete, figure out how to navigate the challenges of the 21st century. And to do that, we need to ground our thinking not in the technology, but in principles and values. And I would argue that it's up to us. It's not up to Congress. It is not up to the institutions of the 20th century who still do not understand fully how the internet works. It's up to us. And while we are celebrating the exits and the valuations and some of the amazing technologies, we have not just an opportunity, we have an obligation and a responsibility to build a society that we want in the 21st century so that it is fair and equitable to everyone. And it's up to you. So when you start thinking about the tech industry, I'd like you to point to New York as the place where these kinds of questions are being asked, where people are organizing themselves in places like Civic Hall and elsewhere. There are 1,800 tech meetups in New York, 60,000 members of the New York Tech Alliance. There is no ecosystem made up of people, not technology, like it anywhere in the world. and I welcome you to join